We got to go to our friend's kids' hockey game yesterday, and then we went again this morning. They had a game this morning before we came up here. And yesterday after we got done, we went out to lunch, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to try to catch the game tomorrow morning. She's like, you guys have church. You have to go work. And I'm like, yeah, it'll be all right. I think we're going to come. And she's like, you're crazy. And I'm like, I don't have any kids in competitive sports right now. I'm shaking. It's like I haven't had to yell at a ref or an official in I don't know how long. I'm going a little nuts. And so I'm like, no, we're going to try to do this if we can. And I've told you guys before that I love that. I've worked on that aspect of my character, getting mad about things that I can't control. It's just, it ends up being, it is what it is. There's a word for that person though, right? You may have heard somebody say something like, don't be that guy, right? Have you heard something like that before? And as soon as you say that, there's probably a guy that pops into your brain, right? It's just when you show up somewhere, maybe it's around town, maybe it's at work, you just know there's that person who is that guy. We have given, it's so funny to me that with the social media and stuff. Sorry, can you? I promise I wasn't talking about you. I got to talking about Don part before I turned this on. But we've given names to these people, right? We say, you may have heard, don't be a Karen, right? Have you heard that before? Don't be there's guys, but don't be a Kyle. That's the guy's version of it. I don't know if you knew that or not. But it's so, maybe, I don't know if satisfying is the right word. There's a place that we have to frequent regularly, and the lady that's worked there is a Karen who's named Karen. And I'm like, oh my goodness, is this the patient zero? Is this where it counts, right? And so the problem with thinking like that, though, is as soon as you start to pigeonhole people, you become that guy, right? You're doing to them what they're doing. And the story that I want to look at this morning, if you follow the blog rant thing, which is what it turns into sometimes, we've been talking about Luke 11 all week. It's where we're going to be this morning. But it's effectively Jesus saying, you Pharisees, don't be that guy. Don't be that person. Right? You're missing what God had intended for you. Right? When it comes to the Pharisees, we used to, when Caleb and Haley were little, when they were that age, we had a little children's church that met in our house. And we would read these Bible stories, and we would give different characters different hand motions to help them remember it. And the one that we gave the Pharisees, whenever we came across the Pharisees, everybody would go, they would do the Homer Simpson facepalm, dope. Right? And the reason was because these were the guys that should have understood the most, and they just missed it. Right? There was something that was in them, that they had this lust for power, they had this lust for their position, and anything that threatened that, it didn't matter if it was true or not, they were just against it. They were trying to preserve their status. They were trying to preserve what was going on. And I have to say this, right? Not all of them. There were some good ones that were there, right? I was a Pharisee that took Jesus' body and went and buried it. There was a Pharisee that came to Jesus at night, right? Nicodemus in John chapter 3. I think John chapter 3. He was a Pharisee. Some of them were really trying to understand what was going on. But by and large, they were doing what institutions do. They're preserving what they had. And anything that became a threat to that was a problem. And so that's what I want to talk about this morning. Now, not us, but well-meaning church people, we have a tendency to, at times, become pharisaical. We become more concerned about the truth. You've heard followers of Jesus. I'm just standing up for the truth. You never see Jesus make that claim. Jesus stood up for love. Jesus always stood up for what was right. In fact, I find it so fascinating, and we've said this before, but I find it so fascinating that the only people that Jesus ever really got onto were the Pharisees. But even in that, when Jesus corrected them, when they came to him with religion, this is what the law said, Jesus always corrected them collectively and generally. It was what we're going to look at today. Woe to you, Pharisees. You don't see him going, woe to you, Fred. Woe to you, Pharisees. It was collective. And then he would say things like, your hypocrisy. He wouldn't call people out specifically, with a very few exceptions. You've got the story of the woman at the well. He does correct her specifically. You've had what you say is correct, right? You've had multiple husbands. And I think, this is just my guess, that the only reason that he does it so specifically is because she comes at him with a religious argument. Hey, you guys worship in Jerusalem, we worship at, over here at Mount Gershom, right? Which one, who do you say is the right one? She tries to turn it religious. And so he does to her what he does to the Pharisees, kind of. When Jesus corrected individuals, he never led with it. You can go read through the stories. He would always correct them extremely generally. Go live your life of sin. He never, I can't think of any, that he called out publicly, like he did the Pharisees, and even when he did that, he did it generally. Well-meaning church people, and again, not us, we get this right? Well-meaning church people, how do they call people out today? Individually and specifically. When we act like that, well, let me say this. This is exactly what the Pharisees were doing to Jesus. Twice in the passage we're going to look at, actually, let me just read the first two verses and then the end of it. Luke 11, starting in verse 37. When Jesus had finished speaking, a Pharisee invited him to eat with him. So Jesus went in and reclined at the table. But the Pharisee was surprised when he noticed that Jesus did not wash before the meal. He was looking for the specific things. Jesus goes, you got food? I'm in. Let's go have a good time. Let's go have a conversation. But it's interesting. Jesus goes, anybody? Yep. Everybody? I don't care if you're the religious people. I don't care if you're completely far from God. You want to hang out? Let's get together. He wasn't worried about his reputation in the least. He wasn't worried about what anybody thought about him in the least. And so Jesus shows up at this guy's house, and the first thing this guy notices, dude didn't wash before he ate. Now my wife notices that, right? Hey, go wash your hands. I'm good. I haven't touched anything, right? But that's what these guys specifically. And you can probably think of times and stories where this is what's called out on Jesus. He didn't wash his hands, right? Or he's breaking the Sabbath tradition. Or, right, I lost the other one that I was going to say. Go to the very end of this section. After Jesus has this conversation with him, he went outside. The Pharisees, the teachers of the law, began to oppose him fiercely. This is verse 53. And to besiege him with questions, waiting to catch him in something he might say. See, if we're not careful, that's us today, because we're standing up for the truth. But that was never what Jesus did. In fact, I'm going to go so far to say is when that's what we take on, that's how we begin to act towards people, especially those who are far from God, we fall in danger into what Jesus is going to talk about today. We become that guy that Jesus is going to warn us about. Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. I'm going to start back in verse 37. When Jesus had finished speaking, and what he had just got done saying was what we talked about a couple of weeks ago, where he says that nobody lights a lamp and he places it on a stand. No, we place the lamp up there, we try to use it. And we have to let our light shine in front of people. Like, that's one of the things. We're not to get approval from people and not to get applause from people, but people have to see our lights. They know where to go for help. Right? That's the argument that Jesus is making. You don't light a lamp and then hide it under a bowl. You place it up high so people know where to go. Right? When he had finished speaking, when he had got done doing that sermon, a Pharisee invited him to eat with him. So Jesus went in, he kicked back, he reclined at the table. Verse 38, the Pharisee was surprised when he noticed that Jesus did not wash before the meal. Then the Lord said to him, "Now you Pharisees clean the outside of the cup and dish, but inside you're full of greed and wickedness. You foolish people. Did not the one who made the outside make the inside also? But now, as for what's inside of you, be generous to the poor, and everything will be clean for you." He says, look, you guys, you Pharisees, I come here in good faith. You invited me, I came in. I know what you're thinking. I think it'd be funny if Jesus did it on purpose, just to provoke the thought out of them. Right? I don't know that that's the case or not. But that's what, that's just my not rightness. And so he comes in and he kicks back and he sees the guy watching him. And he says, look, guys, you guys work so hard to look so good. But don't you understand? I think this is hilarious, right? The one who made the outside, the one that gave you the abilities to interact with the world and to do good or to do evil, right? The person who created you, that made you able to do things, to move, to breathe, to act, to love, to hate, to whatever you want to do. He didn't just make the outside of a person or a cup. He made the inside as well. Wash the inside. See, this is one of the things that I always find fascinating about Jesus. And it's one of the ways that Jesus was so against religion. Because religion, it's always about what did you do. Most of you guys, well, not you guys, well-meaning church people, right? Most people, they feel bad about things they didn't do. I didn't read my Bible enough. If I were just to ask you, how's your faith going? How's your spiritual walk going? How are your quiet times with time with God? I haven't been praying that much. I haven't read my Bible. Right? It's things that we do. The religious things. And Jesus is telling this guy, who I think probably got into it for the right reasons and began to look around the other Pharisees. This is how I get ahead. This is how I stay a part of the group. And something changed inside of him. But he's telling these guys, it's not about the things that you do. It's about what happens in here. Because if you become the right type of person, you'll do the right things. We can't get the cart before the horse. Every time that we do, we become that guy. I don't know if you've seen the kids movie that had come out. It's an adorable little movie. It's called Inside Out. And you should do yourself a favor and watch it. I think there's 2 of them now. But what it is you see these characters interacting, like this little girl, she's just living her life, she plays hockey, her family has to move, but then you get these glimpses, it's her, it's in her head, but it's a physical manifestation of the different emotions. And it's hilarious. You see fear, I think he's the purple one, who's like always like shaking, and she shouldn't do this, don't do this, and they're standing around a control panel trying to decide what the person's going to. You see anger, he's red, and every now and then she gets really mad, like fire's coming out of his head because he's right. But it's a physical manifestation of what's going on inside of this little girl, right? I would be embarrassed if you saw the physical manifestations of what happens inside of me. Wouldn't you be if it was you? Right? This is what Jesus is trying to get these guys to understand. Man, I know you saw that I didn't wash. You're focused on the wrong thing. You've got people all around you right now that need love and compassion and sympathy and empathy. And you're focused on the fact that I didn't. Right? And sometimes we get focused on those things too. He did what? She did what? When what Jesus seems to be saying is that we need to be more concerned about what's going on in here. It's why he would say what we looked at a couple of weeks ago, don't do good in front of others to get something back. That's not an action problem. We shouldn't stop doing good. We just need to fix what's going on inside of here. We need to let Jesus work on what's happening in here. Right? Don't act religious by putting others down. Just see what they did at the other Baptist church, at the Methodist church. I can't believe they would do that. Right? It's those kind of things. I got to thinking, and this could be wrong. I haven't completely thought this through yet, but I got to thinking, I think when we run ahead of Jesus, because this thing's supposed to be a journey, like we're walking with Jesus, you become who you're like, so I spend more time with Jesus so I become like him. I think sometimes we get ahead of ourselves, we run ahead of Jesus, and we start acting like we're in a place that we're not. And then we turn around and see everybody else and we go, what's wrong with you? I think that's where a lot of the church's judgmentalism comes into play. I think it's because we've gotten the cart before the horse. We've focused on the doing side, which in a second he's going to say we shouldn't neglect, but we've not spent enough time focusing on the becoming side. Does that make sense? And so Jesus starts out this little rant thing by saying, guys, we got to wash the inside of the cup. When we do that, the outside will be all right as well. So he says, you guys clean the outside, but you're full of greed and wickedness. God made the inside too. But he links something here that I don't think that I've ever noticed before, and I'm rambling. But he says, but as for what's inside of you, he goes, if you'll just do this, if you'll just be generous to the poor, everything else will be clean for you. And I wrote this week about that. I don't think I've ever seen that verse before. Because he goes, if you want the hack, right, the life hack, right, it's funny, when she likes watching those on YouTube, and she can't do any of them, but she thinks they're funny to watch. And so I've tried to help her create hacks around the house, and we came up with one. When we make hot chocolate, we put the marshmallows in the powder. Then we put the hot water on top. Right? That's our little hack. Right? And it makes it more creamy. Okay? Jesus goes, if you want a life hack, he goes, if you want to get a jump start on what's going on inside of your soul, he goes, if you're generous to the poor, it just has this huge cleansing effect in your soul. When you go love on somebody that can't do anything back for you, that's what he's saying. There's nothing that they can do for you. Go be kind to them. Right? Don't go looking, don't gather a crowd first, but go do something kind for somebody that can't do anything back for you. He goes, that'll give you a leg up on this whole thing right there. He says, but woe to you Pharisees, verse 42, because you give a tenth of your mint, rue, and all other kinds of garden herbs, but you neglect the justice and the love of God. You should have practiced the latter without leaving the former undone. And what was happening was the Pharisees, what they would do was they would go, okay, exactly what does God say I need to do? Okay? This is the law. They would take the law. This is a black and white document. I'm going to do exactly what it says. So I'm going to gather my tenth of what I have, in this case, mint and rue or whatever other it was, and I'm going to bring that to the temple, and I'm going to drop that off. And now I have done my religious obligation, so God loves me, and I love God. Everything's great. And now I'm going to go home, and I'm going to see the guy on the side of the road, and I'm going to be like, I'm sorry, man. I already did the thing. So I don't have anything else. But only if we're like him, we do have else. We do have more. But what these guys were doing, were going, because I've met my religious quota, I've checked all my boxes. Sorry, dude, I already gave it all to the church. Have a good day. Right? Be warm and well fed. Right? Isn't that what James says? Right? See, Jesus is trying to teach them it was never about the religious obligation. This is so important. It's so good to get to see you guys every week, and we get to share stories, what's been going on, right? We find out what to pray about for each other. This is so good. But I don't think Jesus died for us to park our bottoms in pews. And for too many, not us, but for too many well-meaning followers of Jesus, this is the sum total of their religious expression throughout the week. That can't be the case with us. If we allow that to happen, we become that guy. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? So we've got to focus on the details. Jesus says, don't neglect your religious obligations, but don't miss the chance to make an impact in your community. Don't miss the chance to love on your neighbors. Don't miss the chance to let your light shine before people, not for that applause, but so that you can offer them something in the future. Don't be that guy. Don't just keep it about you. Verse 43, he says, woe to you Pharisees, because you love the most important seats in the synagogues and respectful greetings in the marketplaces. He says, woe to you guys. You guys just love it when somebody goes, oh my gosh, he's here. Right? One of the best books I ever read was called Be a People Person. And it starts out with this idea that he goes, there's two types of people. There's a here I am person, and he goes, and there's a there you are person. And he says, followers of Jesus, If you want to learn how to do what Jesus says in Luke chapter 2, right? He grew in favor with God and men. If you want to grow in favor with men, if you want to become more of a charismatic person, if you want to become more of a people person, he goes, at some point you got to move from a here I am person to a there you are person. And that's what Jesus is saying about these guys right now. They would walk in and they'd be like, ta-da! Here I am. And everybody would go, oh, he's here, it's awesome! Which is nice sometimes when that happens. But he goes, Jesus is going, put that back on other people. Don't put yourself forward like that. Don't walk in expecting to be made a big deal about. He goes, let the honor, let the accolades, let them just come to you by what you do. Don't say, no, don't act humble when you're not actually humble, right? But you don't have to push your greatness on other people. You just let that come to you naturally. Go be a person who's respectable in your community. Go be a person who, I love when you look in 1 Timothy 3, and we're not going to flip over there, but that's what he talks about. Somebody, he's talking about the qualifications of an elder, somebody who's supposed to be a leader in the church. He says, they're a person who has a good standing, not in the church, but in the community. They're someone who goes, they're just a stand-up guy. They're somebody, they're reliable, they're trustworthy. If they say they're going to do something, they do it. They're honest, they're hardworking. They're somebody who, I think they're crazy because they follow this, their imaginary friend, right? But they're the type of person I would want to work for. They're the type of person I would want to hire. They're the type of person I hope my kids marry, right? He goes, he goes, be somebody who allows the honor to come to you. Don't go put yourself forth in the community. He says, woe to you guys. Because when you're doing that, you're being that guy. Right? It plays out. You might know somebody. We have we have a neighbor who, on multiple occasions, I've heard him say, "I'm blah blah blah," right? As if it makes it. And then you meet people around town, and like most of the people that you meet that know this person are like, "I can't stand that guy." Right? But it's just that's how they think. I don't know if there's anybody that's in this area that's like that. But it's just like, I'm blah, 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 right? And it's so funny. But as soon as you hear that, you instinctively think, I hope I never turn into that guy. Which is exactly what Jesus is saying. Guys, don't be that guy. Woe to you. Don't be that guy. He says, woe to you, because you're like unmarked graves, verse 44, which people walk over without knowing it. He says, woe to you. He says, you think that you're doing good out in your community, right? And for all the negative I talk about the Pharisees, they did good in the community, right? They were teaching the law. He's going to say where they got it wrong in a few spots here in a minute. But they were doing what they thought what was best for the community. And Jesus is going, what's actually happening is you're like unmarked tombs. And that doesn't mean a lot to us. But in their society, in the Jewish society in this time, to touch somebody that was dead, and this counted as that, it made a person unclean. They couldn't worship with everybody, right? Not like leprosy, not like they're kicked out of the community, but they had to go through a cleansing process to get back into the community so everything could be fine again. So that's why there were certain people that were a lot, the grave diggers and that, they were outcasts because of just the profession that they had fallen into. He goes, what you're doing is you're causing people to become unclean by the way that you're teaching the law. You think that you're doing good, but you're actually hurting people. You ever know somebody that they've always got the right answer for everyone, but their life's a mess? Let me tell you what to do. And I know you're thinking you're looking at him. Right. But you know, they know how to fix it. They know how to do better. But you go, why don't you? What's going on in... He goes, it's kind of like that. He goes, you guys are a mess. What's inside of you, right? In a different place, he says they're just full of rot. Because they were all focused on the outside. They were all focused on their religious activities. And not what was happening in here. When we try to do good and we're causing more damage, we're being that guy. And at this point, I find this so funny. I'll go fast to the last little bit here. I'm going way too long. Verse 46, he says, verse 45, one of the experts in the law answered him, Teacher, when you say these things, you insult us also. Right? This guy, for whatever reason, he was more towards the lawyer side of things and less towards the religious function type of, not a priest, not a Levite, right? His job was to interpret the law, pass it on to these guys. And right, we need these people. We need to understand what's going on. And so he's part of the problem in the sense that he's teaching the Pharisees, this is exactly what God says, this is what it means. So do, right, give your tenth of mint, give your tenth of myrrh, give your tenth of whatever it is, and that's all that you have to do. He's trying to help them understand. And he's going, look, we're not the Pharisees, but people are going to look bad at us too for what you're saying. And I imagine Jesus sitting there going, the way you look bad at me whenever I hang out with the sinners. He doesn't say that, but I can imagine, and that's what he's thinking. I'm guessing that's what he's thinking. And there's something in us. We've got to care less about what our church friends think about about what we do. And we've got to care more about making a difference in our community. We've got to care more about letting our light shine before people that nobody else wants to be around. It's one of the reasons why I thought it was fantastic over at the other church that they had the shelter care thing. Because nobody wanted to step in and work with those guys. And as long as they were over there, they were a part of our church, and I thought that was a fantastic thing that they were doing over there. It's that kind of stuff. It's spending time with the people that nobody else wants to be around. Spending time with the people that, quite frankly, we might not want to be around. But don't worry about being guilty by association. You just go do the right thing. You just go love on the people that you see. Don't wait for somebody else. If you can see somebody that's in need, that needs encouragement, that needs love, that needs sympathy, that needs a hand, and nobody else is doing it, and you can, just step into it. This guy's going, man, Jesus, when you talk about what, you're making us feel bad. Good. Then listen. Woe to you, verse 37, because you build tombs for the prophets, and it was your ancestors who killed them. So you testify that you approve of what your ancestors did. They killed the prophets, and you build their tombs. Because of this, God in his wisdom said, I'm going to send prophets and apostles, some of whom they will kill and others who they will persecute. Therefore, this generation will be held responsible for the blood of all the prophets that has been shed since the beginning of the world. From the blood of Abel to the blood of Zechariah, who was killed between the altar and the sanctuary. Yes, I tell you, this generation will be held responsible for it all. And I read this, And what I think that he's saying, I don't think they're guilty for the sins of their ancestors. I think they're guilty because they committed the same crimes. They saw what their ancestors did and went, probably would have done the same thing. And then because they wouldn't condemn it, and because they wouldn't change, well, they wouldn't change because they killed the new prophet as well, eventually. He goes, you guys carry that guilt. See, don't be the guy that doesn't break the cycle of sin in your family. Right? We've got to take our and I don't like to talk about sin. I don't like to talk about the negative stuff that much. I don't do it that. I like to talk about the positive stuff. Because I think there's enough good stuff that if we just focus on what we ought to be doing, then we don't have time to do the bad stuff. But every now and then we talk about like the lists of sin and this kind of stuff. Right? And this is what he's sharing with these guys. Be somebody who takes their sin seriously. If you know that you're blowing it, if you know that you've just, there's this generational thing. There's alcoholism runs in my family. Pride just runs in my family. Those people, they're just like that. We all have the power to change that, to let they're just like that stop with us. That's what Jesus is telling these guys. When we just perpetuate that and then pass it on to the next generation, we're being that guy. But you, to the Pharisees, but you, don't continue in the sins of your fathers and forefathers and grandparents and ancestors. Whatever that is, break that cycle of sin in your lineage and become light and hope. And then finally he says, woe to you experts in the law, because you've taken away the key to knowledge. You yourselves have not entered, and you have hindered those who are entering in. He says, don't be someone who hides truth. Don't be someone who just sticks with what they've had and what they've always done just because it's what you've always done. I can't think of a better description for a traditional church. He goes, don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. Don't reject new information. Don't reject new ideas simply because you don't like it. And we just went through a political season. And both sides accuse the other side of doing that very thing. Right? Just don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. Be open to what God may be doing in the next generation. Be open to new ways that you can reach out into your community. Be open to new expressions of faith. Be open to new ways of doing things. Don't just put it aside because that ain't how we do it here. Right? See, that's what Jesus is trying to get the Pharisees to understand. This whole list of things. He's going, I came to your house in such good faith. Right? You listen to me teach, right? You listen to me rant, you listen to me talk about how, right, not just you guys, but the common person, we're all supposed to be light to our communities. We're supposed to be the place where you can come find hope and help, and we're supposed to be the place that people are drawn to. But when I walked in your house, what you notice is I didn't do the one thing. Don't be that guy. Don't be that guy. And then again, he ends it. He went outside, and the Pharisees and the teachers of the law began to oppose him fiercely. All the people that were there, all the people that were around, everybody began to come at him and besiege him with questions. We're just waiting to catch him in something that he might say. They were looking for a gotcha. And if we're not careful, that's what we do too. We look to point things out, right? It's what's fallen to us. But we look at our communities and we go, at least I'm not that. And at least I don't do that. And that's never how Jesus treated people who were far from him. It's what we said at the very beginning. The Pharisees, Jesus corrected collectively and in general. The individual stories, Jesus just corrected very categorically. Just stop sinning. And the whole time they were coming at him. You're a drunken, you're a glutton, you do this, you're this, you're this. You break the law, you have no care. And Jesus' response is simply, don't be that guy. Learn how to love, learn how to show empathy, learn how to fix what's going in here, because when what's in here matches what's out there, you're on the right path. Let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, God, help us to take our character, the condition of our heart and soul seriously. God, help us to focus on that more than what people can see, more than what we get praise for, more than what we get criticism for. God, help us to allow you to fix what's broken, to transform whatever's going on into good soil, to not stop loving while you're working on us, to not stop doing good, but to learn how to do it for you and with you. Allow us to help us to allow you to change us from the inside out so that we don't become that guy. It's in Jesus' name that we pray.